happens when the most powerful military in the world can destroy almost any target, but still cannot force its enemy to surrender? That may be the question America is confronting right now. The United States can strike Iranian missile sites. It can destroy radar stations, command centers, ports, bridges, and energy infrastructure. It can deploy aircraft carriers, submarines, bombers, and surveillance systems across the Middle East. It can impose blockades, intercept ships, and launch attacks from thousands of miles away. But here is the uncomfortable question. What if none of that produces a political victory? What if Iran absorbs the damage, continues launching missiles and drones, keeps threatening international shipping, and simply refuses to accept Washington's terms? Does America stop? Does it negotiate? Or does it conclude that the previous round of attacks was not powerful enough and climb to the next level? That is how wars expand. Not necessarily because leaders wanted a larger war on day one, but because every limited action failed to produce the promised result. And today, this danger does not exist in isolation. A major war is still raging between Russia and Ukraine. NATO is strengthening its eastern and northern defenses. Finland and Sweden have become central parts of NATO's military posture near Russia. American forces and resources are being pulled between Europe, the Middle East, and the Indo-Pacific. Meanwhile, the conflict involving the United States and Iran is disrupting one of the most important energy corridors on Earth. So we need to ask a larger question. Are we watching another regional war? Or are several regional wars beginning to merge into one global confrontation? Before answering that, we need to understand something that is often missing from television coverage. Winning battles is not the same thing as winning a war. Part 1. America can hit Iran. But what does winning mean? There is little doubt that the United States possesses overwhelming conventional military power. The American military can identify and strike targets throughout Iran. It has long-range bombers, cruise missiles, stealth aircraft, satellites, cyber capabilities, and naval forces that Iran cannot match symmetrically. If the question is whether America can damage Iran's military infrastructure, the answer is clearly yes. But that is not the real question. The real question is whether military destruction can produce the political outcome Washington wants. Does victory mean protecting commercial shipping? Does it mean ending Iranian attacks on American forces? Does it mean permanently dismantling Iran's nuclear capabilities? Does it mean eliminating Iran's missile program? Does it mean forcing a new political agreement? Or does it mean overthrowing the Iranian government? These are completely different objectives. And each objective requires a different level of military commitment. Protecting ships may require naval patrols and limited strikes. Suppressing missile launches may require a sustained air campaign. Eliminating deeply buried nuclear facilities may require specialized weapons, repeated attacks, and reliable intelligence. Overthrowing a government is something else entirely. That could require ground forces, control of cities, occupation of territory, and a plan for what comes after the existing government collapses. Without a clearly defined objective, military success becomes impossible to measure. Every destroyed target can be described as progress. Every Iranian retaliation can be used to justify another strike, and every new strike can create another reason for Iran to retaliate. As of July 20, 2026, American strikes against Iran had continued. For a ninth consecutive night after an earlier ceasefire collapsed, Iran had retaliated against American-linked targets and Gulf states, while shipping through the Strait of Hormuz had been severely disrupted. Oil prices had risen above $90 per barrel as markets reacted to the escalation. Those facts tell us that escalation is already happening, but they do not tell us how it ends. Part 2. Why Iran does not need to defeat the United States. Iran cannot defeat the United States in a traditional military contest. It cannot destroy the American Navy. It cannot dominate the skies. It cannot invade the continental United States. But Iran does not need to accomplish any of those things. Its strategy can be much simpler. Make the war too expensive, too disruptive, and too politically painful for America to continue indefinitely. Iran can disperse missile launchers. It can move weapons through tunnels and mountainous areas. It can launch relatively inexpensive drones against expensive defensive systems. It can threaten American bases in Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and elsewhere in the region. It can pressure countries that host American forces. It can interfere with oil shipping. It can encourage aligned armed groups to open additional fronts. And most importantly, it can refuse to surrender. This is the central problem of asymmetric warfare. The stronger power usually measures success by how many targets it destroys. The weaker power measures success by whether it remains capable of fighting. For Washington, a week of bombing without Iranian surrender may look like an incomplete operation. For Tehran, surviving that same week may be presented as a victory. Iran's leaders also understand American domestic politics. They know that Americans generally support defending U.S. personnel and keeping international shipping open. But they also know that public support can change when a campaign becomes longer, more expensive, and less clearly connected to a realistic endpoint. Iran therefore has an incentive to extend the timeline. It does not have to win quickly. It only has to prevent America from winning quickly. That difference matters enormously. Part 3. The escalation ladder. Imagine this conflict as a ladder. At the bottom are diplomatic pressure, economic sanctions, and military warnings. Above that are limited strikes against ships, radar systems, launch sites, and isolated military facilities. Then comes sustained air campaigns. After that, attacks expand to ports, bridges, power stations, fuel facilities, and communications networks. Higher still are naval blockades, covert operations, leadership targeting, and ground raids. Near the top are large-scale invasion, regime change operations, and the possible use of nuclear weapons. The danger is not that the United States jumps immediately from limited strikes to the top of the ladder. The danger is that it moves upward one step at a time. Each step can be presented as reasonable when viewed by itself. Iran attacks a ship, so America strikes a missile site. Iran attacks an American base, so America expands the target list. Iran threatens the Strait of Hormuz, so America imposes a blockade. Iran responds to the blockade, so America targets ports. Iran continues fighting, so Washington considers power plants, transportation systems, and leadership compounds. At every stage, officials can say, this is still limited. This is designed to restore deterrence. This is a response, not the beginning of a new war. But from Iran's perspective, the distinction may disappear. A government that sees its military, economy, energy system, and national leadership under attack may believe it is already fighting for survival. And when a state believes the conflict is existential, its willingness to take risks increases dramatically. Iran has already described the confrontation in existential terms, while the United States has expanded strikes and reinstated pressure on Iranian shipping. This is where deterrence can begin to fail. Both sides may believe that backing down will invite further attacks. Both may think one more round of violence will finally convince the opponent to compromise. Both may believe the other side understands their red lines. And both can be wrong. Part 4. Would America use more powerful weapons? When people hear the phrase, more powerful weapons, they often immediately think of nuclear weapons. But there are many stages of escalation before that point. The United States can increase the number of aircraft and missiles involved. It can strike more targets in a shorter period. It can expand from military sites to infrastructure that supports Iran's war effort. It can intensify cyber attacks against command networks, banking systems, communications, and energy management. It can target underground facilities with specialized conventional weapons. It can conduct raids to seize islands, ports, or strategic positions. It can pursue Iranian military commanders more aggressively. It can attempt a much tighter maritime blockade. It can provide additional military support to regional partners. All of these measures would be more severe than a limited air campaign, and all of them would carry the risk of producing an even stronger Iranian response. A nuclear strike remains a very different category. It would break a threshold that has not been crossed in warfare since 1945. It would create enormous diplomatic consequences. It could contaminate civilian areas. It could encourage other governments to accelerate their own nuclear programs. It could weaken American alliances and create pressure on Russia, China, or other nuclear powers to respond politically or militarily. It could also destroy the international norm against nuclear use that has survived for more than 8 decades. That is why nuclear weapons are not the automatic next step, simply because conventional bombing fails to force a political surrender. America still has many conventional escalation options, but that does not mean the nuclear risk is zero. The risk would rise sharply if American leaders came to believe that Iran was preparing an imminent nuclear attack, if a major American base suffered catastrophic casualties, or if the war expanded to include direct confrontation with another nuclear-armed power. The most likely danger, however, is not a sudden nuclear. It is a prolonged conventional war that gradually destroys the barriers, preventing a much larger conflict. Part 5. The Strait of Hormuz changes. Everything, for most Americans, the Strait of Hormuz may appear to be a distant body of water. But what why? Happens there can affect the price of gasoline in Texas, transportation costs in California, manufacturing expenses in Ohio, and inflation across the entire country. The strait is one of the world's most important energy transit routes. A major disruption does not have to stop every tanker to create economic damage. Shipping companies respond to risk. Insurance companies raise rates. Crews may refuse dangerous assignments. Tankers wait for military escorts. Markets react to rumors before the physical supply has even disappeared. By July 20th, traffic through the strait had fallen sharply amid attacks and competing attempts by Washington and Tehran to control navigation. Reuters reported that only 4 vessels transited on one recent Sunday, while oil prices climbed as the fighting expanded. This gives Iran leverage. Not enough leverage to defeat America militarily, but enough to impose costs on the global economy. It also creates pressure on Gulf states. Countries such as Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates have important relationships with Washington. Some host American forces, but they also live much closer to Iran than the United States does. They understand that their airports, desalination plants, refineries, ports, and cities could become targets. For these governments, supporting the United States may strengthen their security relationship with Washington. But becoming a battlefield could threaten their own stability. That is why regional allies may publicly condemn Iran while privately urging restraint. They want American protection. They do not necessarily want an unlimited American-Iranian war fought across their territory. Part 6. Could America invade Iran? Technically, the United States has the ability to launch ground operations. But invading Iran would be one of the most difficult military undertakings in modern American history. Iran is far larger than Iraq. It has a population of tens of millions. Its geography includes mountains, deserts, major cities, and long coastlines. Its government has spent decades preparing for conflict with the United States. Even if American forces defeated conventional Iranian units, that would not automatically produce political control. The harder phase could begin afterward. Who would govern Iran? Would the country remain unified? Would ethnic and regional divisions produce civil conflict? Would Iranian forces shift into insurgency? Would neighboring countries intervene? Would American troops be expected to occupy Tehran and other major cities? How many troops would that require? How many years would they remain, and how much would it cost? Americans have already lived through the consequences of military campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan, in which removing the existing government proved easier than building a stable replacement. That experience makes a full-scale invasion less likely. But military operations often expand beyond the original plan. A limited raid may require a rescue operation. A temporary occupation of an island may require permanent defenses. An attack on a nuclear site may require repeated strikes. A blockade may require boarding vessels. Boarding vessels may produce captured or killed American personnel. And casualties can create political pressure for retaliation. This is called mission creep. It does not require a secret master plan. It can emerge from a chain of tactical decisions. Part 7. Congress and the American public. There is another question Americans should be asking. Who decides how far this war goes? The Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war. The president serves as commander-in-chief. For decades, however, American presidents from both parties have conducted major military operations without formal declarations of war. The result is a gray area in which presidents argue that immediate action is necessary, while Congress debates funding, authorization, and withdrawal after military operations are already underway. President Donald Trump formally notified Congress in July 2026 that hostilities with Iran had resumed, opening another dispute over the war powers framework and the administration's authority to continue the campaign. Reuters reported that critics from both parties questioned the administration's legal interpretation after Congress had previously sought the withdrawal of American forces. This is not simply a legal argument. It affects strategy. A president may be able to order a strike quickly, but sustaining a large war requires money, personnel, public legitimacy, and political support. That is why clear objectives matter. The American people should be able to answer 5 basic questions. What is the mission? What would victory look like? What is the estimated cost? How long could it take? And what happens if the first plan fails? When officials cannot answer those questions, the public is often asked to support escalation without knowing where the escalation leads. Patriotism should never mean refusing to ask questions. American service members deserve public support. They also deserve leaders who explain why they are being placed in danger and how their mission can realistically end. Part 8. How the Ukraine. War connects to this crisis at first glance. Ukraine and Iran appear to be separate conflicts. They involve different countries, different alliances, and different histories. But strategically, they are connected. The United States has a limited supply of air defense interceptors, precision weapons, intelligence resources, aircraft, ships, and trained personnel. Every major commitment in the Middle East affects what may be available elsewhere. Russia understands this. China understands it. America's allies understand it. If Washington moves more air defense systems and aircraft toward the Middle East, European allies may wonder what remains available for NATO's eastern flank. If American weapons production is divided among Ukraine, Israel, US forces, and other partners, delivery schedules become strategically important. If oil prices rise, Russia may receive additional energy revenue. If Washington becomes politically consumed by a Middle Eastern war, Moscow may see an opportunity to increase pressure on Ukraine. NATO has continued expanding its military posture along its eastern and northern frontiers. In June 2026, new multinational forward forces began operating in Finland and Sweden. At NATO's Ankara summit, allies reaffirmed collective defense commitments and pledged tens of billions of euros in military assistance and training for Ukraine. Russia, meanwhile, has warned that foreign forces deployed in Ukraine, even following a future peace agreement, could be treated as legitimate targets. That does not mean Russia and NATO are already at war, but the physical distance separating their forces is shrinking. The number of weapons is increasing, military exercises are expanding, red lines are becoming more complicated, and political trust is disappearing. A confrontation in the Middle East could therefore affect the balance of risk in Europe. This is how regional wars begin to form a global system. They do not have to be controlled by one central alliance. They only have to influence each other. Part 9. Is this World War III? The phrase World War III is powerful. It attracts attention. It creates fear. But it can also prevent careful analysis. A world war is not simply a world with several wars. There were many regional wars during the Cold War, but the United States and Soviet Union avoided fighting each other directly on a global scale. What would transform today's conflicts into a genuine world war? One possibility would be sustained direct combat between Russia and NATO. Another would be a direct war between the United States and China, particularly over Taiwan or the South China Sea. A third would be the formation of openly coordinated military blocs operating across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. Nuclear use would radically change the situation. So would nationwide military mobilization by several major powers. We have not necessarily crossed those thresholds, but we may be entering what could be called a pre-World War environment. In such an environment, several characteristics appear at the same time. Regional wars become connected. Military alliances expand. Economic routes become battlefields. Defense production increases. Neutral countries are pressured to choose sides. Cyber attacks blur the line between peace and war. Major powers test one another's commitments. And every crisis reduces the resources available for the next crisis. This does not make a global war inevitable, but it makes miscalculation more dangerous. The First World War did not begin because every European leader woke up wanting a 4-year catastrophe. It emerged from mobilization plans, alliance commitments, fear, deadlines, nationalism, and the belief that failing to act immediately would create an even greater danger. History does not repeat itself exactly, but leaders still make decisions under pressure. They still misread intentions. They still underestimate resistance, and they still believe wars will be shorter than they become. Part 10. 4 possible paths from here. So what happens next? There are 4 broad possibilities. Scenario 1. Controlled escalation. The United States continues attacking Iranian military targets. Iran continues limited retaliation, but avoids actions likely to cause mass American casualties. Shipping remains dangerous, but some traffic continues with military protection. Both sides claim strength while quietly searching for a diplomatic exit. This may be the least destructive near-term scenario, but controlled escalation is difficult to maintain. Depends on accurate intelligence, disciplined commanders, and a shared understanding of limits. One missile landing in the wrong place could destroy that balance. Scenario 2. A wider regional war Iran expands attacks on American bases.